So today we want to study Daf Ches, or at least try to figure Daf Ches Amud Aleph, at least, maybe even more than that. And we're up to Omar Mar on the second law. So we've established in the Mishnah Daf Zayin and Beis that according to Beis Hillel, a person could bring Shalmei Chagigah from Masechet. He doesn't have to bring it from Chul. Omar Mar, Beis Hillel Omer min Maser Chagigas Yontiv Rishon Shel Pesach can come from most Masechet. So Gemara Samai Davar shebechovahu v'chol davar shebechovahu ein haba ela min achulin. If you're talking about the Chagigah, the Karban Chagigah, that's a chova. And with regard to a chova, we have a principle, ein haba ela min achulin. So you can't bring a most Ma'aser Sheni and purchase a Chagigas Yontif. Or, for example, let's say you took a neder and a dava, and you designated a certain animal as your neder and a dava, your kiyum of your chofa. Now you want to use that for the Chagigah of Yontif Rishon Shel Pesach. You can't do so because it's got to come from Chul. So if we apply this principle to Shalmei Chagigah, which is a chova to bring a Karban Chagigah, he cannot bring him in a Chulin. How could Beis Hillel and our Mishnah allow you to bring it from Maseh? And now we get to the Sugi of Tarovos, of Tofel. Omar Ula, that which Beis Hillel said you're allowed to bring the Karban Chagigah in a Maseh, that's only Bitofel. In other words, he takes most of Chulin together with most of Ma'aser Sheni, mixes them together, and that's called Tofen. Yiloshin Tofen. It's kind of a mixture, a secondary element. We're going to see a machlokes exactly how to pull this off, this Tofel. But the idea of the Tofel is to be Mechaber, Maser, and Chulin together. Like, let's say, for example, he's going to spend, let's say, Shtemos Kesef to buy a behemoth, and let's say it's not enough for his Seudah, and now he has to add Chagigah. And that's called a Tosefes. So this Tosefes, according to Ula, that's called B'tofel, he can bring from Maser, and he can be Mechaber together with Chul. And together, these two funds that are now integrated together, they are the funds that he's going to use to bring a Karban Chagigah. And that's when the Torah allows you to bring min Maser, because the Maser is mixed together with Chul. So now we have to figure out, okay, you mixed Maser Sheni Mos with Chul. How do you now bring this Chagigah min Chul if you already mixed in Maser Sheni Mos? What's the methodology? And here we have machlokes between Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan. Chizkiah Amar Toflin behema lebehema. The ain Toflin mos lemos. Rabbi Yochanan Toflin mos lemos. Toflin behema. Okay. Let's go slowly. We start with Chul. We start with Chizkiah. Chizkiah's methodology of Toflin is behema lebehema. He brings one behema as a Chagigah, and that he purchases from most Chulin, of course. And if he needs additional behemoths for his Chagigah, then he'll bring it from most Meiser Sheni. Now, what does that mean? The law is that all the behemoths that you bring on the first day of Yom Tov are called Chagigah. They have a shem korban Chagigah. But once he's fulfilled his obligation with the first animal, which he of course had to buy minachud because he can't buy a chova from Meiser Sheni money. Now the rest of the animals that he wants to bring, also each one as a korban Chagigah, that he can buy with Meiser money because he's already fulfilled his basic chova. And this is the method that Chizkiah recommends because he's going to fulfill his obligation with an animal that was purchased exclusively minachud, without any tarovas of Meiser Sheni. I guess the drawback of it is that the next animal is going to be kulam and Meiser Sheni. But it doesn't matter. We have to make sure that the davar shebechova comes minachud, and that he does with the first animal. But Chizkiah is opposed to the alternative method, which is the one that's going to be advocated by Rabbi Yochanan, and that's called Toflin. And Chizkiah says, "Ain Toflin mos lemos." You're not allowed to mix up the mos of Meiser Sheni together with the mos of Chulin and buy with that combination a behema gedola, some big gigantic animal, right? A big, cow for his Chagigah. Because if you're going to do so, then there's a taroves in his Chagigah of Masechet. He needs a behema shlema that comes solely and exclusively minachulin. And Rabbi Yochanan just the opposite. Toflin mos lemos. He's going to mix mos chulin with mos Meiser Sheni, make a big, pail or a sal of this mixture. He'll go ahead and with this mixture of mos, he's going to purchase a gigantic animal, so he'll have enough for eating. And this is the method that Rabbi Yochanan recommends. Why is it adif? Because then there is what we call chulin me'uravim bechol chelek shel achilas shlavim. In other words, whatever monies you buy, you use to buy, so for the purpose of achilas shlamim, of this Chagigah, it by definition it has within it chulin. You don't have any section in the animal, any part of the animal that's purchased exclusively from most Meiser Sheni. So when you come to eat the Chagigah, there's not one piece of meat that you're going to eat that's exclusively min hamasa, because every part of the animal was purchased by this partnership, this integration of most Meiser Sheni together with most chul. But ain't toflin behema behema. Rabbi Yochanan is absolutely opposed to Chizkiah's method of bringing one behema rishonim min achulin and the others min hamasa, because in such a case, when he eats, part of the animal l'shem Chagigah, it's coming kula min hamasa. You cannot relate it to the chulin because there's no mixture of chulin in there. Tanya Kavosei, Chizkiah, Tanya Kavosei, Rabbi Yochanan. Tanya Kavosei, Rabbi Yochanan. We find a price that supports Rabbi Yochanan that Toflin is what? Is mos lemos. And this is all based on a pasuk. The Brisa is going to quote a pasuk in Dvarim Perek Tes Zayin. And the pasuk reads, V'asisa chag Shavuos Hashem Elokecha misas nidvas yodcha. All right, we're going to try to figure out what that means, misas. Asher titein ka'asher yivarech Hashem Elokecha. How do we interpret the pasuk misas? Misas is chulin shebiyadcha. Again, we're going to have to prove that from Achashverosh of all places. But in any way, the word misas means chulin. And the Torah is commanding you to make the Chag Lashem and bring korbanos min achulin shebiyadecha. Okay, so if what you're telling me is that it's got to be mevi chovaso minachulin, so how could you allow, which is the sheet of Rabbi Yochanan, of toflin mos limos? No, we should really assume that there's no leniency and there's no permissibility to be ma'ariv mos shalchun together with mos ma'aseh, to buy, a behema from both of these mos. And he fulfills his obligation. Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says in the next part of the pasuk, I didn't read the whole pasuk, but after it says Masas nitfas yodcha shatitein kasher yivarecha Hashem elokecha, and this is a ribuy in the Torah, that he's allowed to bring his karban from anything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu blessed him with, any blessing that was bestowed upon him, even min hamaseh. So at the beginning of the pasuk, so to speak, it says the word masas, which means minachulim. And yet the ribuy of the pasuk says he's allowed to bring it from maseh. Because mikol mashe bircha Hashem b'nasanlo, which is min hamaseh. So how do we reconcile this? And the answer is it's got to be masas, so you've got to have mos shalchulin, but it's also kasher yivrech Hashem elokecha, which means you're allowed to be ma'ariv together with the chulin maser sheni money. So the language of the Bryce is very clear. Minayin shimrotza la'ariv ma'ariv, and that's what we call litfol mos b'mos. This is Rabbi Yochanan. Tanya Kavose, the Chizkiah, on the other hand, we have another brayso that reflects and supports the sheet of Chizkiah that toflim behema lebehema, because the Torah says Yasiso Chag Shavuos Lashem Elokecha. Again, back to the same pasuk in Dvarim Tesai, and it says Masas Nitvas Yodcha. And what are we going to do with this word Masas or Misas? Melami Sha'odam maybe Chovaso Min HaChulin. That the word misas means chulin, is Beit Shammai Omrin. Whatever he's makri for his ovas Chagigah b'yom rishon shel Chag, then it's min hachulin. The eino yochel l'tafel behem min hamasa klal. So Beit Shammai excludes l'tafel behem min hamasa. That's not going to be on the agenda. It's not accepted. And whatever he's bringing on Yom Tov Rishon Shel Chag as a Chagigah, it's a davar shebechova. Beit Shammai says it has to come exclusively from chulin, and he's not allowed to be tofel klal. That's as far as Yom Tov Rishon. Al mikan v'yelech in the balance of Yom Tov Shar Yemos HaChag, he already fulfilled his obligation of chovas Chagigah b'yom Rishon. He's now bringing Shalmei Simcha to fulfill the mitzvah of Basar, of Achilas Basar, the Simcha Sachag, and Simcha of Basar. So as far as Simcha is concerned, then it's not a chova to bring this karma. You don't need a karma that's miyuchad or mezuman exclusively as a Shalmei Simcha. There's no such obligation. You just have to get Basar for Simcha. Is then minamas, and then he doesn't have a chova on this particular carbon of Shalmei Simcha, and he can use most of my susheni to purchase it. Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel Omrim, the first animal that he brought lit carbon Chagigah is Achila Rishona, and that's called Achila Rishona al Shulchanah, and that has to be minachulin, which means he cannot be tofel or ma'arev min hamas. So again, since he's coming to fulfill his Chovas Chagigah, which is a Davar Shebechova, therefore he has to do it Menachul. But afterwards, he already brought, and he was makriv the first animal. He already fulfilled his obligation. It's no longer Davar Shebechova. Is Mikan V'elech, other behemoths that he brings to be makriv, so that he'll have enough Basar Chagigah, because he has a bunch of ochlim and he wants to guarantee that everyone gets his portion in the Basar, in Achilus Basar Chagigah, then he can be makrivid min ha'maser. Again, even though this is Chizkiah's principle called Toflim Behema Behema. He already fulfilled his obligation with the first Behema. Correct? So now he wants to bring other Behemos so that be enough Litzorach Kol HaOchlim Imo, so then he can bring him in a Maaseh. And it could be even on Yom Tov Rishon itself. This brisa is not going to differentiate between Yom Tov Rishon and the balance of Yom Tov. In any event, we see clearly from the pasuk Asher Yivarechecha to be marbe a second behema, etc., meaning from the second one and on, and it doesn't have to be menachulin. So the Tana here in this second brisa, in explaining the shita of, in formulating the shita base Hillel with regard to Chagigah, is machalik between the first behema for the first achilu that requires chulin, as opposed to the other behemoths mikan v'elech that he can bring min ha'maaseh. Again, even on the first day of Yom. So we see clearly the principle of Chizkiah of toflim behema l'behema. Then the Brisa says, "Usha'ar kol yemos haPesach adam yotzi yedei chovasa." In other words, if it's during Chol HaMoed, he's bringing shlomim, shalmi simcha, then he can fulfill his obligation with Maaseh Behema. He's mafresh Maaseh Behema, the 10th animal, after they go out of the corral. His mitzvah now is to eat basar and be sameach beregel, and he can be yotze with Maaseh Behema, because it's not a chova per se. Now the Gemara is now going to analyze the last part of the brisa that during Chol HaMoed he could bring Maaseh Behema, and he could be yotze the mitzvah of simcha by eating the basar of Maaseh Behema, the 10th animal that goes out of the corral. Why the emphasis here on Chol HaMoed, implying that he cannot do this on Yom Tov? Yom Tov, my time alone. Why is it on Yom Tov itself he's not allowed to bring a behema of Maaseh Behema shalo, and then he'll eat it as a kiyum of simcha? He writes here, Madua b'Yom Tov atzmo ein yochel lahavi behemas Maaseh Behema shalo. Let him bring on Yom Tov his Maaseh Behema, and he'll eat it again, not for the Rishonah, because the Rishonah is only Boy Menachulin. So we're talking about Maaseh. So more answers, Amar of Ashi. There's a Gzeras Chachamim. We're not going to allow you to bring Maaseh Behema on Yom Tov. Why not? Dilma Osi Lasure B'Yom Tov. We're afraid that if we allow him to bring the carbon Maaseh Behema on Yom Tov, he's going to be mafresh the carbon Maaseh Behema on Yom Tov, which means he's got 10 animals in the A there, and he's going to let 9 go out. What's he going to do when he gets to the 10th animal? He puts a big red sign on it. The Efshal La'aseh B'Yom Tov Mishum Sakarta. So if we allow him to be makriv the korban masa behema on yontif, he might come to be ma'aser the behema from his aid there on yontif. And what's so terrible if on yontif he'll be ma'aser? The answer is mishum sakarta. We're afraid they'll violate a meleches yontif doraisa of what's called seva sikra. He's always used to designating on the 10th animal, he puts a sikra on it, this red sign, and tzviya asura b'yontif. And here we have a gigantic diun. Why did the Gemara have to come up with this new gzeira mishum sakarta? We know that afroshes from some maestros is also on yontif mishum tikun. It's like a tikun, a takana. It's like a makav patish. So what compelled the Gemara to introduce mishum sakarta? That's a deal. Here he says hikshu b'tosves shebegemara. A Gemara says yichol lo mashein ve'asr b'yontif kevod shebekach u'magdish es behema v'asu chacham lahakdish b'yontif. V'tirtzu shebehema shal mas behema harei hi kedosha ve'omedes shari chayv lakdisha min haTorah. All right, he's got three different valiatos. Now the Gemara goes back to the brisa that we had earlier, and we use the word misas to indicate chulin, that he has to bring his korban chova min achulin. My mashma, how do you know the word misas? Lishna de chulin hu. V'chsiv vayosam hamelech hachashverosh mas al. Or some people use the graga here. This is the last pasuk at the end of Perek, almost at the end of the Megillah. So Achashverosh levies. That's offensive. He levies a tax on the land, and the tax is min achulin, right? Because there was no chiyuv until now. So that's the meaning of the word misas. It comes from mas. Now the Mishnah says that Yisrael, Yotzi midei chovasam, you can fulfill Shalmei Simcha with Nedarim Unidavos, or any kachim, as long as you're allowed to eat the basar. Tana Rabbanu, we learned in the Braysi v'samachtu b'chagecha, l'ravos kol minei smachos. Any method that you employ that'll bring simcha, because the Torah doesn't say of a vesa shlomim achal tasham, but kol mine smachos. Listen. We can omru chacham Yisrael yotzi de chovasam b'nidam nidavis b'maisa behema hakohanim b'chatas v'yasham b'bachar u'b'chaz v'shok yachol. I might think af be'ofos u'b'menachos. Right, the kohanim will eat from a chatas ha'of. Or, for example, the only regalim bring minachos, and the kohanim are allowed to eat the mincha. Talmud Lomar, that's where we have the pasuk samachta b'chagecha, which means that the Torah is equating shalmei simcha with shalmei chagigah. And here we look on daf ches amud beis. Misha chagigah ba mehem. In other words, behemos. Right, you can only bring the korban chagigah from behemoths. You can't bring it from ophos or from chita or siora. Yatzu elu, to exclude ophos u'menachos she'ein chagigah b'ameh. That the korban chagigah is derived from what it says in the Torah, v'lo yolin chelev chagigah haboker. So a korban chagigah, the Torah says you're not allowed to leave the chelev of the chagigah outside of the mizbeach overnight until Amud Shachar. But we're talking about a chagigah as a korban that has chelev. Ophos and menachos ein b'hem chelev. We have now a hekesh that shalmei simcha einom boim ela min behema, but not from ophos and so forth, which ein b'hem chelev. And Rav Ashi Omar, let's derive this halacha that shalmei simcha is not from ophos and menachos mivis samachta nafki. He derives it from the pasuk v'samachta, that when the Torah commands us on the mitzvah of simcha, the Torah has in mind that a person should eat basa behema, yatsu elu she'ein behem simcha. You don't get excited about eating ofos. I personally like ofos, but I guess in the Gemara's time now. We just use the word b'chagecha for the hekesh to derive the requirement of behema. Ahu, the word b'chagecha likide Rav Daniel Bar Katina. The Omer Rav Daniel Bar Katina Omer Rav V'ayin she'ein nosim noshim b'moed she'nemar b'samachta b'chagecha v'lo b'ishtecha. That the mitzvah of simcha on a chag during the Yemos HaRegel should be simchas hachag, b'samachta b'chagecha v'lo b'ishtecha. So this is not a time that's appropriate for getting married for a different simcha b'ishtecha, because if he gets very involved in the love, the chavivus of his ishto, then he's going to leave simchas HaRegel out, and it'll be only a simcha machmas ishto. So that's what we're going to do according to Rav Ashi with the pasuk b'chagecha. Okay, then so this leads us to the Mishnah on Daf Ches Amud Beis.